The sound hit Adrian Bourne before he saw her, a strangled sob that didn't belong in the marble silence of his penthouse study. He froze in the doorway, briefcase still in hand, tie loosened after 18 hours of merger negotiations that had left 3 board members in tears. But those were tears of greed, of power plays and stock options. This sound was different. Raw. The kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and broken. Elena Ripley knelt on his Persian rug, one hand clutching a dust cloth, the other pressed against her mouth as if she could stuff the grief back inside. Her shoulders shook violently. Papers were scattered around her knees. Old documents that had fallen from behind the bookshelf she'd been cleaning, manila folders with his company's logo faded by time. Elena. She jerked up, mascara streaking her cheeks, eyes wide with the panic of being caught. Not caught crying. Caught existing in his space with emotions, as if the help was supposed to be invisible, mechanical, silent. Mr. Bourne, I'm so sorry. She scrambled to gather the papers, her hands shaking so badly the documents fluttered back to the floor. Stop. His voice came out sharper than intended. He dropped his briefcase. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. I shouldn't be. Elena. He crossed the room in 3 strides, breaking every unspoken rule about employer-employee distance that his mother had drilled into him since childhood. He crouched beside her, close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, close enough to smell the lavender of her shampoo mixed with furniture polish. Talk to me. She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her face made his chest tighten. It wasn't just grief. It was betrayal. Accusation. You want to know what's wrong? Her voice cracked, but there was steel underneath. She thrust a paper at him, her hand trembling. This is what's wrong. He took it, squinting at the faded letterhead. His company. His signature at the bottom. Dated 7 years ago, back when he'd just taken over as CEO, when he'd signed hundreds of documents daily without reading half of them, trusting his department heads, playing the part of decisive leader his father had groomed him to be. Asterisk termination notice. Employee number 3847. Daniel Ripley. Effective immediately. Reason, gross misconduct and theft of company property. Asterisk. The room tilted. That's my father, Elena whispered, and her voice was a blade. Daniel Ripley. He worked in your supply chain division for 23 years. 23 years of perfect attendance, of Employee of the Month awards, of bringing work home on weekends because he believed in the company. In your company. Adrian's throat closed. He stared at the signature. His signature, looping and confident across the bottom of the page. They fired him for theft he didn't commit, she continued, words tumbling out faster now, like a dam breaking. Someone in management needed a scapegoat for missing inventory, and my father was too honest to play politics, too trusting to see it coming. He fought it for months, but you'd already blacklisted him in the industry. No one would hire him. No references. Nothing. Elena. He had a heart condition. Did you know that? The stress made it worse. We lost our insurance the day he was fired. He needed medication, surgery eventually, but we couldn't afford it. I watched him get sicker. I watched him sell everything we had. I watched him die 3 years ago in a county hospital because he couldn't pay for the treatment that might have saved him. The words hit like physical blows. Adrian couldn't breathe. I found these papers today, she said, gesturing to the scattered documents. Behind your bookshelf. Internal memos proving he was innocent. Emails showing another employee admitted to the theft 2 weeks after my father was fired. But no one bothered to call him back. No one cared enough to fix their mistake. She stood abruptly, backing away from him as if his proximity burned. I've been cleaning your house for 8 months, she said, and her laugh was bitter, broken. 8 months of scrubbing your floors, organizing your life, smiling politely while you asked about my day. And the whole time, you're the reason my father is dead. You signed that paper. Your signature. Your company. Your decision. I didn't know. The words sounded pathetic even to his own ears. You didn't know because you didn't care enough to know. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. My father worshipped your family. He used to tell me stories about your grandfather, about how Bourne Industries was built on integrity and loyalty. He believed that until the day he died, even after everything, even after you destroyed him. Adrian stood slowly, the document still clutched in his hand, his entire world fracturing around that faded signature. 7 years ago. He'd been 26, arrogant, drowning in his new position, signing whatever his executives put in front of him because that's what powerful men did. They decided. They delegated. They didn't waste time on the details. And Daniel Ripley had paid with his life. "I need to fix this," he said, voice hoarse. "Fix it." Elena's eyes flashed. "He's dead. You can't fix dead. You can't give me back the 3 years I spent watching him fade, working 2 jobs to buy medications that barely helped, lying to him that everything would be okay when we both knew it wouldn't. Then what do you want from me?" The question came out desperate, raw. She stared at him for a long moment, something complicated flickering across her face, rage and grief, and something else he couldn't name. "I don't know," she whispered finally. "I've spent 3 years hating the nameless, faceless corporate machine that destroyed my family. And now it has a face. Your face. The same face that asks me how my morning was. That leaves extra money at Christmas. That accidentally called me by my first name instead of Miss Ripley 6 weeks ago and looked embarrassed about it." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unsaid words. "I should go," she said, moving toward the door. "Elena, wait." "I can't," her voice broke. "I can't be here right now. I can't look at you." She fled, leaving him alone with scattered papers and the ghost of her grief. Adrian sank to his knees on the Persian rug, that termination notice still in his hand, and for the first time in 7 years, he let himself remember the man he'd been when he took over the company. Young, ambitious, terrified, so focused on proving himself worthy of the Bourne name that he'd forgotten the people behind the numbers. His phone buzzed. Another deal closing. Another victory. Another $1 million added to a fortune built on signatures and decisions and the lives of people he'd never bothered to see. He looked at the door Elena had disappeared through, and something fundamental shifted in his chest. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. Because for the first time and longer than he could remember, Adrian Bourne had seen himself clearly, and he didn't recognize the man in the mirror. Hey, beautiful people. I hope you're ready for this story because it's going to take you on an emotional roller coaster you won't forget. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Are you team he needs to make this right? Or team some things can't be forgiven? And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button because trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds. This is just the beginning, and I promise you, the truth gets so much deeper. Adrian didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study until dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline. Every document from that manila folder spread across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? A crime. Not the legal kind. His lawyers would assure him of that. But the moral kind that hollowed out a man's chest and left him gasping. Daniel Ripley's employee file painted a picture Adrian couldn't unsee. 23 years of 5-star performance reviews. Letters of commendation. A photo from a company picnic showing a man with Elena's eyes and a smile that spoke of simple pride and honest work. He'd had a daughter in college. A wife who'd died of cancer 2 years before his termination. He'd worked double shifts to pay off medical debt and still shown up early every morning. And Adrian had destroyed him with one signature. The irony burned. His grandfather, the man whose name still hung in the lobby of every Bourne Industries building, had built his empire on a single principle: people before profit. Always. Adrian had heard the stories his whole life. How his grandfather knew every employee by name. How he'd paid for workers' kids to go to college. How he'd rather lose a contract than compromise his integrity. Then his father had taken over, and the company had grown cold, efficient, ruthless. By the time Adrian inherited the throne, that founding principle was just words carved into marble, beautiful, meaningless decoration. He'd become his father. No, he'd become worse than his father, because at least his father had never pretended to be anything else. His phone lit up with a text from his assistant. Miss Ripley called. She's resigning. Effective immediately. Adrian's fingers tightened around the device. Of course she was. He'd stolen her father, and now she couldn't even look at him without seeing that theft reflected back. He pulled up her employment file. Elena Ripley, 26 years old. Hired 8 months ago through an agency. Degree in art history from a state school. Loans still being paid off, he'd bet. She worked for him 3 days a week, 2 other clients the rest of the time. Before this job, she'd waitressed, worked retail, done temp work. The kind of resume that spoke of someone scrambling, surviving, carrying weight that should have been shared. He remembered the first day she'd shown up. His previous housekeeper had quit after he'd snapped at her for moving papers on his desk, the incident that made him realize he'd become the kind of man people feared rather than respected. Elena had arrived with careful politeness and downcast eyes, and he'd barely noticed her. But slowly, she'd become impossible not to notice. The way she hummed while she worked, old jazz standards that reminded him of his grandmother. How she'd rearrange his books not alphabetically, but by color, creating accidental art on his shelves. The morning he'd found her crying over a news story about shelter dogs, and she'd apologized, embarrassed, as if caring that deeply was something shameful. The time he'd come home sick and she'd left homemade soup in his fridge with a note, "Your kitchen had the ingredients." Seemed wasteful not to use them. He'd started leaving notes back. "Thank you." Then, "This was delicious." Then longer messages about his day, about deals falling through or small victories, writing to someone who wasn't on his payroll in the ways that mattered. Someone who didn't want anything from him except basic human decency. She'd write back. Short responses at first, then longer ones. Her handwriting was terrible, rushed and looping, and it made him smile. She'd tell him about art exhibits she couldn't afford to visit, books she was reading from the library. Her father, always her father. These stories about a man who sounded wise and kind and nothing like the thief Adrian's executives had painted him to be. He used to say the measure of a man isn't what he does when people are watching, but what he does when no one would ever know. That note was still pinned to his corkboard. Adrian pushed back from his desk and moved to the window. The city stretched below him, millions of people with millions of stories he'd never paused to consider. How many Daniel Ripleys had he created? How many lives had he casually ruined with signatures on documents he never read, with efficiency reports that treated human beings like malfunctioning equipment? His phone rang. James Chun, his COO and closest friend since boarding school. "You sound like death," James said without preamble. "The merger celebration is in 6 hours. Please tell me you're not backing out." "I need you to pull a file for me," Adrian said. "Daniel Ripley, fired 7 years ago for theft." Silence. Then, "Why are you digging into ancient history?" "Because that ancient history just walked into my study in the form of his daughter. She's my housekeeper, James. Was my housekeeper. And she found the documents proving he was innocent." "Shit." A long exhale. "Adrian, that was Wilson's department. He cleaned house when you first took over, remember? Said you needed to make examples, establish authority. Half those terminations were wrong," Adrian finished. "Half of them were wrong. And I signed every one without question because I was too arrogant and too scared to admit I didn't know what I was doing. You were 26 and suddenly running a Fortune 500 company. You trusted your leadership team. I trusted the wrong people. And Daniel Ripley paid for it with his life." Another pause. "His daughter, how is she?" Adrian closed his eyes, seeing Elena's tear-stained face, the betrayal in her eyes. "Destroyed. And looking at me like I'm the monster who destroyed her. What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? The merger celebration would announce Adrian as one of the most successful CEOs of his generation. He'd be lauded, celebrated, photographed for magazine covers. And somewhere in the city, Elena would be trying to forget his face while struggling with bills her father's wrongful termination had created. "I'm going to make it right," Adrian said. "You can't bring him back." "No, but I can make sure his daughter never struggles again. I can find out how many other Daniel Ripleys there are. I can." He stopped, a plan forming. Dangerous. Probably stupid. Definitely going to cost him everything he'd built. But for the first time in years, he felt like his grandfather's grandson. "I can burn it all down and build something better from the ashes." "Adrian." He hung up and pulled up Elena's phone number. His thumb hovered over the call button. What could he possibly say? "Sorry I killed your father didn't quite cover it." Instead, he texted, "Please don't resign. I need a chance to explain. To fix this. I know I don't deserve your time, but I'm asking anyway." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Finally, there's nothing to explain. I read the documents. I know what happened. You know what the paperwork says. You don't know the whole truth. Meet me. 1 hour. Anywhere you choose." The dots flickered for so long he thought she'd given up. Then, the coffee shop on 5th and Broadway. 1 hour. And then I never want to see you again. Adrian grabbed his coat, something tight and painful lodging in his chest. She was giving him 60 minutes to undo 7 years of damage. 60 minutes to prove he was more than the signature on that termination notice. 60 minutes to save something he hadn't even known he'd been building. A connection to the one person in his life who'd seen him as human rather than powerful. He had no idea what he was going to say, but he knew with absolute certainty that losing Elena's trust, her presence, her terrible handwriting, her existence in his carefully controlled world, would cost him more than any business deal ever could. The coffee shop was deliberate neutrality, public enough to feel safe, intimate enough to speak truth. Elena sat in the back corner, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched, eyes fixed on the scarred wooden table like it held answers. Adrian saw her before she saw him. She'd changed from her cleaning clothes into jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. Without the uniform of service between them, she looked younger, vulnerable, and still heartbreakingly beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. He slid into the seat across from her, and she flinched. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I'm here to listen, not to forgive." Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled against the ceramic. "I don't expect forgiveness." He pulled a folder from his bag, thicker than the one she'd found, heavy with evidence he'd compiled through the sleepless night. "But I need you to know the truth. All of it." She didn't reach for it. What truth could possibly matter? The truth that I was a coward. The words tasted like ash. 7 years ago, I inherited a company I wasn't ready to run. I was 26, terrified, and drowning. My father had just died, and everyone was waiting for me to fail. So I trusted the wrong people. I signed whatever my executives put in front of me because that's what I thought power looked like: delegation, decisiveness, not questioning the experts. That doesn't excuse. It doesn't excuse anything, he interrupted gently. But Wilson Harding, my VP of operations at the time, was running a scheme. He was stealing from supply chain inventory and selling it on the side. Your father discovered discrepancies. He reported them through proper channels. Elena's eyes flickered up to meet his. Harding needed a scapegoat. Your father was honest, principled, exactly the kind of man who'd never see betrayal coming. So Harding framed him, manufactured evidence, and put the termination papers on my desk with a stack of 50 other documents I signed that day without reading. Adrian's hands clenched. I killed your father through negligence, through arrogance, through being exactly the kind of CEO my grandfather would have been ashamed of. He pushed the folder toward her. I found the proof last night. Internal emails, testimony from other employees who were too afraid to speak up, evidence that Harding confessed to another manager 2 weeks after your father was fired. That manager buried it because Harding had dirt on him too. Elena opened the folder with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned pages, and he watched emotions cascade across her face. Shock, anger, grief, and something that looked like vindication mixed with devastation. My father tried to tell everyone he was innocent, she whispered. No one would listen. They treated him like a criminal, like trash. I know, and I'm so goddamn sorry. The words felt microscopic against the weight of what he'd done, but they were all he had. I fired Harding and his accomplice this morning. I've instructed my legal team to prepare a full exoneration of your father's record. His personnel file will reflect the truth, and I'm establishing a foundation in his name for wrongfully terminated employees and their families. It won't bring him back, but maybe it can prevent other families from suffering what you suffered. She was crying now, silently. Tears dripping onto the documents that proved her father's innocence came too late. Why? She asked, voice breaking. Why does this matter to you now? Because you got caught? Because I found out. Because I've been sleepwalking through my own life for 7 years, and you woke me up. The confession came out raw, unplanned. These past 8 months, your notes on my counter, the way you'd rearrange my books and leave art in my spaces, the stories you told about your father, you reminded me what it means to be human. To care about something beyond profit margins and stock prices. I was your employee. That's not. You were never just an employee. He leaned forward, desperate for her to understand. You were the only real thing in my entire artificial life. The only person who didn't want something from me, who saw me as just a man who could maybe use homemade soup on a bad day. Elena's breath hitched. Don't do this. Do what? Make this about us. About some connection. My father is dead because of you. He's dead because I failed him. Because I failed every principle my grandfather built this company on. You're right to hate me, But Elena, his voice dropped, urgent. I need you to know that meeting you, knowing you, it changed something fundamental. You made me want to be the man your father believed Bourne Industries stood for. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against floor. I can't do this. I can't sit here while you try to turn your guilt into some kind of romance novel redemption arc. That's not what I'm, isn't it? Her eyes flashed. You feel terrible, so now you're going to fix everything with money and foundations and pretty words about connections. But that doesn't change what happened. That doesn't give me back the 3 years I spent watching him die. The nights I held his hand in that hospital. The way he apologized to me with his last breath, apologized for failing me, when he'd never failed anyone in his entire life. The coffee shop had gone quiet. Other patrons pretending not to watch the drama unfolding in the corner. Adrian stood too, but didn't move closer. You're right. Nothing I do will change the past. But I'm asking you to let me try to change the future. Not just yours, everyone's. Let me tear apart every decision made in those 7 years. Let me find every other Daniel Ripley and make it right. Why would I help you feel better about yourself? Because your father deserves to be remembered as more than a tragedy. His voice cracked. Because maybe together we can make sure his legacy is justice instead of just grief. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the armor of her anger. I have a condition, she said finally. Anything. I want access to everything. Every file, every decision, every termination from the past 7 years. I want to be there when you find the others. When you make amends. I want to watch you face what you've done. It was punishment. She wanted a front row seat to his reckoning. Yes, he said simply. And I want my father's name on that foundation. His face. His story. I want everyone to know what happened to him. What your company did. Yes. I'm not doing this for you, she said fiercely. I'm doing this for him. And for everyone else you hurt. I know. She grabbed her coat, then paused at the table. I still hate you. I know that too. But as she turned to leave, she looked back. Monday, 9 a.m. Your office. Don't be late. Then she was gone, leaving him in a coffee shop full of strangers and the ghost of something that felt dangerously like hope. Adrian sat down heavily, staring at the folder of documents. She'd agreed to see him again, to work with him. It wasn't forgiveness, might never be forgiveness, but it was a door left barely ajar. His phone buzzed. James, did she listen? He typed back. She's giving me a chance to make it right. Starting Monday. And after that, Adrian thought about Elena's eyes, the fire in them, the grief and strength and terrible, beautiful honesty. He thought about how she'd looked at him like he was human despite every reason to see him as a monster. How her father's death had been the catalyst for him to finally become the man he was supposed to be. After that, I become someone worthy of her respect. Even if that's all I ever get. He gathered the documents and left cash on the table. Too much, as always, but today it felt less like carelessness and more like penance. Outside, the city rushed past in its usual chaos, but something had fundamentally changed. Adrian Bourne had spent 7 years building an empire on efficiency and profit. Now he was going to spend however long it took tearing it down and rebuilding it on the one thing that mattered. The people his grandfather had always put first, starting with making sure Daniel Ripley's daughter never doubted her father's integrity again. What's going to happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments. Do you think Elena will ever truly forgive him, or are some wounds too deep to heal? If this story is hitting you in the feels, subscribe so you don't miss a single moment of this journey. Trust me, what's coming next will change everything you think you know. Monday morning arrived with the weight of Judgment Day. Elena stood outside Bourne Industries headquarters, staring up at the glass tower that scraped the sky. Her father had walked through these doors for 23 years, had believed in the name carved into the steel entrance, had died still believing, somehow, that the mistake had been his. She pushed through the revolving doors. The receptionist's smile faltered when Elena gave her name. Mr. Bourne is expecting you. Top floor. The elevator ride felt eternal. Elena studied her reflection in the polished metal, bargain store blazer, hair tamed into something professional, her father's old watch on her wrist. She touched it for courage. You deserve better, Dad. I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. The elevator opened directly into Adrian's office suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her yearly rent. And Adrian, standing by a conference table covered in boxes, hundreds of personnel files stacked like a mountain of buried secrets. "You came," he said, and the relief in his voice annoyed her. "I said I would." She set her bag down. "All business. Where do we start?" 7 years of terminations. 347 employees let go under my watch. He gestured to the boxes. "I need to review every single case." Elena moved to the table, opened the nearest file. Robert Chun, fired for insubordination. She scanned the details, saw the familiar pattern, vague accusations, no real evidence, rushed process. "This one's suspicious." "How can you tell?" "Because it looks exactly like my father's file. Same terminology, same lack of specifics. Same VP signature." She held it up. "Wilson Harding again." Adrian's jaw tightened. He pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. Harding signed off on 63 terminations in 18 months, all in supply chain and operations. How many people reported to him? About 200. So he fired nearly a third of his department in a year and a half, and no one questioned it. I didn't question it. I was told he was optimizing efficiency. The self-loathing in Adrian's voice was palpable. God, I was an idiot. Elena wanted to agree, to twist the knife, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the exhaustion carved into his face. He looked like he hadn't slept since their coffee shop meeting. Maybe it was the way his hands shook slightly as he pulled another file. "We need to contact these people," she said instead. "Find out what really happened. I have investigators working on locating them." "But Elena," he paused, meeting her eyes. "Some of them won't want to talk. Some will be angry. Some might sue. This is going to get ugly." "Good. It should be ugly." What happened to them was ugly. They worked in silence for hours, building a list of suspicious terminations. Elena cross-referenced dates, found patterns, clusters of firings right before quarterly reports, disappearances of employees who'd filed complaints, convenient scapegoats for missing inventory or failed projects. "Your company was rotten," she said finally. "Not just Harding. This goes deeper." Adrian stood, paced to the window. "I know. I've been looking at executive communications. Harding wasn't working alone. There's a whole network. Managers covering for each other. HR burying complaints. Legal making problems disappear. So what are you going to do?" He turned, and something in his expression made her breath catch. It was fierce, determined, almost reckless. "I'm going to burn it all down. Fire everyone involved. Bring in outside auditors. Make every dirty secret public. That'll destroy your reputation." "I don't care about my reputation. I care about doing what's right." "Since when?" The question came out harsher than intended, but she couldn't help it. "You spent 7 years not caring." "Since you." The words hung between them, dangerous and electric. "Don't," Elena warned. "Don't what?" "Don't tell the truth." Adrian moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar, and something darker. "You think I haven't noticed that every file we've opened, every injustice we've found, you fought for those people like they were your own family? You think I haven't seen the way you touch your father's watch when a case hits too close? Stop trying to make this personal. It's already personal. It's been personal since the moment you told me what I'd done. Since I realized the best part of my week was reading your terrible handwriting on notes about shelter dogs and library books." Elena's heart hammered. "You're my father's killer. I know, and I'd give anything to change that. But I can't. All I can do is try to become someone who deserves to stand in the same room as Daniel Ripley's daughter." She wanted to stay angry. Anger was safe, clean, simple. But looking at Adrian now, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, evidence of his own complicity spread before him like a confession, she saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine remorse. Real change. A man willing to sacrifice everything he'd built to make amends. It terrified her. "We should keep working," she said, voice unsteady. Adrian nodded, stepping back, giving her space. But the air between them had shifted, charged with something neither could name. They found 12 more suspicious cases by evening. 12 more families destroyed by corporate greed and willful blindness. Elena called the first number on their list, a woman named Sarah Connor who'd been fired for performance issues despite a flawless record. "Mrs. Connor? My name is Elena Ripley. I'm calling about your termination from Bourne Industries 5 years ago." Silence. Then, "Who is this really?" "I'm working with Adrian Bourne to investigate wrongful terminations. My father was Daniel Ripley. He was fired under false accusations, and we've discovered he wasn't alone." "Daniel Ripley." The woman's voice cracked. I knew him. Good man. I heard he passed. I'm so sorry. Elena's throat tightened. Mrs. Connor, will you tell me what happened to you? The story poured out. Sarah had reported sexual harassment by a manager. 2 weeks later, she was terminated. She'd lost her house. Her marriage had crumbled under financial stress. She'd spent years fighting depression and barely surviving. When Elena hung up, she found Adrian watching her with devastation in his eyes. He'd heard every word on speaker. 13, he said hoarsely. 13 lives destroyed. And we're just getting started. Elena looked at the mountain of files still to review, thought about all the Sarah Connors and Daniel Ripleys out there, and something crystallized inside her. This wasn't just about her father anymore. This was about every person who'd been chewed up and spit out by a system that valued profit over people. We work until we've contacted every single one, she said. That could take months. Then it takes months. She met his gaze, saw her own determination reflected back. You wanted to make this right? This is what right looks like. No shortcuts, no easy answers. We face every person we find, and we own what was done to them. We? Adrian asked quietly. Elena hesitated. Using we felt like forgiveness, like partnership, like something dangerously close to trust. But looking at Adrian, at the way he'd dismantled his own empire without hesitation, the way he'd made her father's vindication his singular mission, she couldn't deny that they were in this together now. We, she confirmed, and pretended not to notice how his shoulders straightened, how something like hope flickered across his face. They ordered takeout and worked until midnight, building a case against the company Adrian had once been proud to lead. And somewhere between the 3rd termination file and the 10th phone call, Elena realized she'd stopped seeing only her father's killer when she looked at Adrian Bourne. She was starting to see the man he could become. And that scared her more than hatred ever had. The investigation is just beginning, and already we're seeing these two become partners in this mission. But can Elena really separate her grief from her growing feelings? Comment below and tell me. Is it too soon for her to soften toward him, or is this exactly how healing begins? Don't forget to subscribe because this emotional roller coaster is far from over. 3 weeks into the investigation, Elena found the letter. It was buried in a box marked Executive Correspondence, Confidential, dated 6 years ago. The handwriting was shaky, desperate, and it was addressed to Adrian Bourne personally. Dear Mr. Bourne, I am writing to you directly because I have nowhere else to turn. My name is Daniel Ripley, and I was terminated from your supply chain division 8 months ago for theft I did not commit. I have tried every channel, HR, legal, my union representative, and no one will listen. I am not writing to beg for my job back, though my family is struggling. I am writing because I cannot let an injustice stand. I have always believed that Bourne Industries was built on integrity, and I want to believe that you, as the grandson of Thomas Bourne, would want to know the truth. I have evidence that Wilson Harding has been manipulating inventory records for personal profit. I reported this, and 2 days later, I was accused of the very crimes I tried to expose. I am attaching copies of the original discrepancy reports I filed, along with time-stamped evidence that shows. Elena's hands shook so badly, she almost dropped the pages. She rifled through the attachments. Everything her father had compiled, proof of his innocence, proof of Harding's guilt, all neatly organized and sent directly to Adrian. 6 years ago, she looked up. Adrian was across the room, on a call with investigators. He looked tired, driven, transformed from the man who'd signed termination papers without reading them. She'd watched him work himself to exhaustion these past weeks, personally calling every victim, offering restitution, dismantling the corrupt network piece by piece. She'd started to trust him, started to feel something dangerous and warm when he smiled at her overcase files, when he remembered how she took her coffee, when he listened to her ideas like they mattered more than his own. And he'd been lying the entire time. Adrian. Her voice cut through the room like glass. He turned, saw her face, and immediately ended his call. What's wrong? She held up the letter. Did you receive this? He crossed to her, took the pages, and she watched his expression shift from confusion to horror as he read. Oh my God, you knew? The words came out hollow. 6 years ago, my father sent you everything. The proof, the evidence, a personal plea. And you did nothing. Elena, I never saw this. It's addressed to you. It's in your executive correspondence. It has a delivery confirmation stamp. I get hundreds of letters a day. My assistants screen everything. I never. He was scanning the pages frantically. This should have been flagged, escalated. Someone buried it. How convenient. Her laugh was bitter. Just like someone buried the evidence after my father was fired. Just like someone made everything disappear. Tell me, Adrian, how many coincidences does it take before it becomes a pattern? You think I knew about this? His voice cracked. You think I read this letter from your father, saw his evidence, and chose to ignore it? I don't know what to think anymore. She was shouting now, weeks of suppressed emotion erupting. I've been working beside you, starting to believe you were different, that you actually cared. But you had the proof 6 years ago. You could have saved him. He was still alive when he sent this. He still had time. And you? I didn't know. Adrian's composure shattered. God, Elena, you have to believe me. If I'd seen this, if I'd had any idea, then who did see it? Who intercepted a letter marked urgent and confidential and made sure you never received it? They stared at each other, the same terrible realization dawning simultaneously. Adrian pulled up his email archive, fingers flying across the keyboard. My assistant at the time, Margaret Shaw. She handled all my correspondence, decided what reached my desk. He pulled up files, and Elena watched his face drain of color. She was sleeping with Wilson Harding. I found out months later, had to fire her for violating company policy. So she buried the letter to protect her boyfriend. And I fired her before she could tell me what she'd done. Adrian sank into a chair, the letter still clutched in his hands. Your father sent me proof. He trusted me to do the right thing. And my own staff betrayed us both. Elena wanted to stay angry, wanted to hate him for this new revelation, but something in his devastation rang true. She'd watched him these past weeks, seen the genuine horror when they found each new victim, the way he'd written personal checks for restitution before the legal settlements were finalized, how he'd insisted on facing every person he'd wronged personally instead of hiding behind lawyers. This wasn't a man who'd willingly ignored her father's plea. We need to find Margaret Shaw, she said finally. Adrian looked up, something desperate and grateful in his eyes. You believe me? I don't know. But I know my father sent this letter because he believed in truth. So we follow it wherever it leads. She paused. Even if it destroys us both. He stood, and suddenly they were inches apart, the letter between them like evidence at trial. Elena, I swear to you if I'd known. But you didn't know. Because you'd built a system where you didn't have to know. Where people like Margaret and Wilson could operate without oversight. Where my father could scream the truth and still die unheard. You're right. And I can't change that. But I can make sure it never happens again. Pretty words. Then let me prove them. He reached for her hand, hesitated. Let me find Margaret. Let me get the whole truth. And then you can decide if I'm worth forgiving. Elena looked at their almost touching hands, felt the pull of something stronger than anger or grief. She thought of her father's letter, the faith he'd had in the Bourne name even after everything. The belief that somewhere beneath the corporate machinery was a man who would do right. Maybe her father had been early, not wrong. Find her, Elena said. And Adrian, no more secrets. If we're doing this, we do it with complete honesty. No matter what it costs. No matter what it costs, he echoed. Within an hour, they'd tracked Margaret Shaw to Portland. She'd remarried, changed her name to Margaret Foster, worked as an administrative assistant at a law firm. Adrian booked 2 flights for the next morning. That night, Elena stood in her tiny apartment, staring at her father's photograph. He looked so proud in his Bourne Industries uniform, so certain that hard work and integrity mattered. I found your letter, Dad, she whispered. You tried. You fought. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. Her phone buzzed. Adrian, thank you for not giving up on me. Or on this. Your father deserved someone who believed in him. I'm sorry it took so long to be that person. Elena stared at the message, her heart a complicated tangle of grief and something that felt dangerously like hope. She typed back, we leave at 6 a.m. Don't be late. Then, after a long pause, and Adrian, I'm starting to believe you're trying to be that person now. Don't make me regret it. She watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again. Finally, I won't. I promise. Elena closed her eyes, her father's watch heavy on her wrist, and wondered if trusting Adrian Bourne would be the worst mistake of her life, or the beginning of something her father would have wanted her to find. Tomorrow they'd face Margaret Shaw and learn the complete truth about how her father's final plea for justice had been buried. Tonight, she let herself admit that somewhere along the way, Adrian had stopped being just her father's killer and started becoming something far more complicated. Someone she was terrified she might be falling for. Hold up, did you catch that? Margaret Shaw buried the letter to protect Wilson Harding, and Adrian never even knew it existed. This changes everything. Drop a comment and tell me. Do you believe Adrian's innocent in this, or is there still more he's hiding? The truth is about to explode in Portland, and you won't want to miss it. Hit subscribe if you're as hooked as I think you are. Margaret Foster opened her door in Portland to find her past standing on the welcome mat. She was older, grayer, but her eyes held the same calculation Elena recognized from the employee photo in her file. Those eyes widened when she saw Adrian, then hardened when they landed on Elena. I wondered when you'd come, Margaret said flatly. You knew we'd find the letter, Adrian said. I knew someone would eventually. Truth has a way of surfacing. She stepped aside. You'd better come in. The house was modest, neat, filled with photographs of a life built far from Manhattan's towers. Margaret gestured to a sofa, but remained standing, arms crossed defensively. I'm not apologizing, she said before either could speak. You want me to say I'm sorry for protecting Wilson, for burying that letter? I won't. I loved him. You helped him destroy innocent people, Elena said, voice shaking. I helped him survive in a company that would have eaten him alive otherwise. You think Wilson was the only one cutting corners? The only one playing dirty? Margaret laughed bitterly. Bourne Industries was a shark tank. Everyone was stealing, lying, backstabbing. Wilson just got caught. My father wasn't stealing, Elena said. He was honest. He was good. Your father was naive. Margaret's words were bullets. He thought integrity mattered. He thought the system would protect him if he just told the truth. That's not how the world works. Adrian stepped forward. Where's Wilson now? Something flickered across Margaret's face. Pain, quickly masked. Dead. Killed himself 2 years after you fired him. Couldn't handle the shame, the blacklist. He jumped off his apartment building. She met Adrian's gaze. So if you're here for revenge, you're late. The room went silent. Elena felt sick. I didn't know, Adrian said quietly. Of course you didn't. You never knew anything. That was the problem. Margaret moved to a desk, pulled out a folder. But since we're confessing sins, you should know the whole truth. She handed the folder to Adrian. Elena watched his hands tremble as he opened it. What is this? He asked. Proof that your father knew everything. Elena's heart stopped. Thomas Bourne Jr. knew about the corruption, Margaret continued. Knew about Wilson's schemes, about the systematic cover-ups, about employees being used as scapegoats. He approved it, called it necessary losses for optimal efficiency. Adrian's face drained of color. That's not possible. My father wouldn't. Your father built the machine that ate people like Daniel Ripley alive. You just inherited it and never questioned how it ran. Margaret's voice was almost pitying. Wilson showed me the emails. Your father explicitly instructed him to handle problems quietly and minimize disruption to operations. What do you think that meant? No. Adrian was shaking his head. He was demanding, yes, but he wouldn't deliberately hurt people. Wouldn't he? Or did you just need to believe he wouldn't because accepting the truth would mean your entire legacy is built on exploitation and corruption? Elena watched Adrian crumble, watched everything he'd been working to rebuild shatter around him. She wanted to comfort him, but her own mind was reeling. If Adrian's father had known, had approved, then Adrian's ignorance wasn't just negligence. It was willful blindness passed down through generations. Why are you telling us this? Elena asked. Because I'm tired. Margaret's shoulders sagged. I'm tired of carrying Wilson's secrets. Tired of knowing that good people died, while men like Thomas Bourne Jr. slept soundly in their mansions. And because, she looked at Adrian with something like regret. Because you were different. You were young, stupid, arrogant, but you weren't cruel. Not like your father. Wilson used to say you were a disappointment to the Bourne name because you actually seemed to have a conscience. Then why didn't you tell me? Why bury Daniel's letter instead of exposing my father's corruption? Because I loved Wilson more than I loved truth. And by the time I realized what a mistake that was, it was too late. Daniel Ripley was dead. Wilson was spiraling. And I'd become exactly the kind of person I'd always despised. Elena stood abruptly. She couldn't breathe in this room, suffocating under the weight of revelations that kept rewriting everything she understood. Her father hadn't just been betrayed by one corrupt executive. He'd been sacrificed by a system designed to protect men like Adrian's father. And Adrian, God, Adrian had been trying to redeem a legacy that was rotten from the root. "I need air," she said, and fled before either could stop her. Outside, the Portland rain fell cold and cleansing. Elena walked without direction, her father's watch blurring through tears. She'd thought finding the truth would bring closure. Instead, it brought only more questions, more pain, more impossible moral mathematics. Her phone rang. "Adrian." She declined the call. It rang again, and again. Finally, she answered. "Elena, please. Your father killed mine." The words came out flat, dead. Not accidentally. Not through negligence. He designed a system specifically to destroy people like my dad. "I know. And you can't fix this, Adrian. You can't make restitution or build foundations or apologize your way out of this. Your entire fortune, your entire name, it's all built on blood. On my father's blood. So what do you want me to do?" His voice broke. "Tell me what to do. I want you to have never signed that termination notice. I want your father to have been a good man. I want my dad to be alive." She was sobbing now. "I want to stop feeling like I'm betraying him every time I look at you and see someone worth saving." Silence. "Then, you think I'm worth saving?" "I don't know anymore. I don't know anything anymore." Elena leaned against a building, rain soaking through her jacket. "These past weeks, working with you, watching you dismantle everything to make things right, I started to believe in you. Started to feel things I have no right to feel. But how can I trust you when your entire legacy is poisoned? When loving you would mean forgiving the unforgivable. Loving me." Adrian's voice was barely a whisper. Elena closed her eyes. The admission hung between them, impossible and true. "I have to go," she said. "Elena, wait." She hung up, turned off her phone, stood in the rain, and let herself break completely. Because the truth was worse than she'd imagined. It wasn't just that Adrian's company had killed her father. It was that the system had been designed to do exactly that, and Adrian was so deep inside it that even his genuine remorse couldn't wash away the stain. How could she love the son of the man who'd ordered her father's destruction? How could she walk away from the only person who'd ever fought this hard to make things right? Inside the house, Adrian sat with Margaret's folder in his hands, reading his father's emails with growing horror. Every casual order to eliminate problems. Every directive to protect the bottom line at all costs. Every reminder that sentiment has no place in business. His father hadn't just allowed the corruption. He'd orchestrated it. And Adrian had worshipped him. Had spent 7 years trying to live up to his legacy, never questioning what that legacy actually meant. His phone showed 17 missed calls to Elena, all unanswered. "She'll never forgive me now," he said to the empty room. Margaret appeared in the doorway. Maybe she shouldn't. Maybe some things are too broken to fix. Adrian looked up at her, this woman who'd loved a corrupt man enough to become corrupt herself, and saw his own possible future, spending the rest of his life carrying guilt that no amount of good deeds could erase. "I'm in love with her," he admitted. "Daniel Ripley's daughter. The woman whose father I helped kill. And I don't know how to be worthy of that." "You probably can't be," Margaret said, not unkindly. "Some sins are too big to redeem. Some distances are too far to cross." Adrian stood, gathered the damning evidence of his father's crimes, and walked out into the rain to find Elena. Because maybe Margaret was right. Maybe he couldn't be redeemed. Maybe Elena should, walk away and never look back. But he had to try, had to face her with the complete, ugly truth and let her decide if the man he was becoming could ever matter more than the men who'd come before him. He found her 3 blocks away, sitting on a bench, soaked and shivering. "Your father was a monster," he said quietly. "Mine created the machine that killed yours deliberately. I'm the son of a monster, and I've been trying to save a legacy that deserved to burn." Elena looked up at him, mascara running, eyes devastated. "I know I can't fix this," Adrian continued. "I know loving you is asking for something I don't deserve. But Elena, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure no one else suffers what your father suffered. Even if you can't forgive me. Even if you leave and I never see you again." "I don't want to leave," Elena whispered. "That's what's destroying me. I should hate you. Should walk away. But I can't stop seeing the man you're becoming instead of the man you were." They sat in the rain, broken and hopeless, the truth finally laid bare between them. And neither knew if love could survive in the ruins of so much betrayal. They sat in the rain for what felt like hours, two broken people drowning in legacy and loss. Elena spoke first, her voice barely audible over the downpour. My father used to say that a man isn't defined by his father's sins or his father's virtues. He's defined by what he chooses to do with the hand he's dealt. Adrian looked at her, rain streaming down his face, hope and devastation warring in his eyes. He told me that when I was 17, angry at him for not being rich, for not giving me the life my friends had. He said, "Elena, I can't give you money or status or easy answers, but I can give you the choice to be better than your circumstances." Her voice cracked. He was talking about himself too. His father was an alcoholic who abandoned the family. My dad chose to be different. Your father was a better man than mine could ever dream of being. Yes, but Adrian. She turned to face him fully, and something in her expression had shifted. Still hurt, still grieving, but no longer hopeless. You're choosing to be different too. You're not your father. You're not the man who signed that termination notice without reading it. You've spent every day since I told you the truth dismantling his legacy and building something else. It's not enough. Maybe it never will be. Maybe I'll spend the rest of my life carrying grief for what was stolen from me. But I can choose what I do with that grief. She reached for his hand, hesitant, trembling. I can let it poison me, make me bitter, make me incapable of seeing good when it's right in front of me. Or I can honor my father by being who he raised me to be, someone who believes in second chances and redemption. Adrian's fingers intertwined with hers, desperate and gentle. I don't deserve a second chance. My father didn't deserve to die. I didn't deserve to lose him. None of those people Wilson and your father destroyed deserved what happened to them. Elena's grip tightened. The world isn't about deserving, Adrian. It's about what we do with the unfair, broken, terrible hands we're dealt. Something cracked open in Adrian's chest, a pressure that had been building since the moment he'd seen Elena crying in his study. He pulled her close, and she came willingly, rain-soaked and shaking, pressing her forehead against his shoulder. "I'm so angry at you," she whispered against his neck. "And I'm falling in love with you. And I don't know how to hold both of those truths at the same time. You don't have to choose. I'll carry both. Your anger and your love. Whatever you can give me." His arms tightened around her. "I'll spend every day earning the right to hold you like this." They stayed like that, two souls trying to forge something beautiful from ashes and rain, until Elena pulled back. "I have an idea," she said, fire returning to her eyes. "Margaret said your father's emails prove everything. We use them. We go public with all of it. The corruption, the cover-ups, your father's deliberate destruction of innocent people. We burn the Bourne legacy to the ground and build something completely new from the foundation up. That'll destroy the company. The stock will crash. Thousands of jobs will be saved by a company that actually values its people," Elena interrupted. "Adrian, you've been trying to reform something that was designed to be corrupt. You can't fix a broken foundation. You have to tear it down and rebuild." Adrian stared at her, seeing not just Daniel Ripley's daughter, but a woman with vision and courage that humbled him. "You want me to publicly denounce my own father? Admit that Bourne Industries' entire success was built on exploitation? I want you to tell the truth. Complete, ugly, devastating truth. And then I want us to create the company my father believed existed. The one built on your grandfather's actual principles, not the corruption that followed. Us." His heart hammered. "You'd stay? You'd help me rebuild?" "On one condition." Elena's eyes held his, unwavering. "No more hierarchy. No more Billionaire and his employee. We're partners. Equal stake, equal say, equal responsibility. You bring the resources and the name. I bring the perspective of everyone your family ever stepped on. Together, we build something that actually matters." Adrian felt tears mix with rain on his face. She wasn't just offering forgiveness. She was offering purpose, partnership, a chance to transform everything. "Yes," he said. "God, yes. Equal partners. Complete transparency. We tell every victim's story, including your father's. We make the Daniel Ripley Foundation the heart of the new company. And we start with Margaret." Elena's jaw set with determination. "She gets immunity in exchange for testimony. Her story, Wilson's story, your father's emails. All of it goes public. We let the world see exactly what we're fighting against." They returned to Margaret's house, drenched and transformed. Margaret took one look at them, hands clasped, aligned in purpose, and something like relief crossed her weathered face. "You're going to expose everything," she said. "Not a question. Everything," Adrian confirmed. "And we want your help. Full testimony in exchange for immunity from legal action. Your chance to finally tell the truth." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Wilson would hate this. He'd say I'm betraying him." "Wilson is gone," Elena said gently. "But Daniel Ripley's daughter is standing here, offering you a chance to make his death mean something, to prevent other families from suffering what mine did." Margaret nodded slowly, then grabbed her laptop. "I saved everything. Every email, every document, every piece of evidence Wilson showed me. I told myself it was insurance, but really, I think I knew someday I'd need to make this choice." They worked through the night, building the case that would destroy the Bourne Empire and create space for something better. Margaret's testimony was damning. Specific dates, specific orders, specific victims whose lives Thomas Bourne Jr. had casually dismissed as acceptable losses. As dawn broke over Portland, Adrian looked at the complete evidence of his family's crimes and felt something unexpected: freedom. For 7 years, he'd been carrying a legacy he didn't understand. Now, he could finally put it down and pick up something of his own choosing. "When we do this," he said to Elena, "I'll lose everything. The respect, the board's support, probably half the company's value. My mother will never speak to me again. I'll become the Bourne who betrayed the family name." Elena took his face in her hands. "You'll become the Bourne who finally lived up to your grandfather's actual legacy. The one who chose people over profit, truth over comfort." She kissed him then, soft and certain. "And you won't lose everything. You'll have me." The kiss deepened, both of them pouring weeks of tension and grief and impossible hope into the connection. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I know I have no right to, but you love me because you're finally becoming someone who knows what love means. Someone willing to sacrifice everything for what's right." Elena smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen since that terrible day in his study. "And I love you because you're not the man who signed that paper anymore. You're the man who's spending his life making sure no one else ever has to." They flew back to New York with Margaret and a laptop full of evidence that would change everything. On the plane, Adrian drafted the press release that would announce his father's corruption, his own complicity through ignorance, and the complete restructuring of Bourne Industries. Elena fell asleep against his shoulder, Daniel Ripley's watch still on her wrist, and Adrian understood what his grandfather had meant about people being worth more than profit. He'd found the most valuable thing he'd ever have: a partner who saw him at his worst and loved him into becoming his best. Tomorrow, they'd face the world. Tonight, they had each other, and that was enough to rebuild on. The Bourne Industries boardroom had never seen anything like this. Adrian stood at the head of the table, Elena beside him as an equal, not behind him, not supporting him from the shadows, but shoulder to shoulder. The board members shifted uncomfortably and used to seeing the cleaning woman in their sacred space, much less standing where only executives belonged. James Chen sat to Adrian's right, having spent the flight back reviewing every document. His loyalty to Adrian had won over his loyalty to the company's reputation. Margaret Shaw's testimony played on the screen behind them, her face gaunt but resolute as she detailed decades of corruption. "This is absurd," Richard Stark, the CFO, interrupted. "You're destroying shareholder value based on the word of a disgruntled ex-employee," and he sneered at Elena. "A maid with a vendetta." "Partner," Adrian corrected coldly. "Elena Ripley is now a 50% equity partner in Bourne Industries. The paperwork was filed this morning." The room erupted. "You can't just. That's not legal. The shareholders will never." "Enough." Adrian's voice cut through the chaos. "You want to talk about legal? Let's discuss the 347 wrongful terminations, the systematic fraud, the evidence that my father explicitly ordered the destruction of innocent employees to protect profit margins." He pulled up the emails on the screen. His father's words, cold and calculating, ordering managers to eliminate problem personnel and prioritize optics over individual circumstances. "This is the legacy you're all protecting. This is what Bourne Industries became under my father's leadership, and what it remained under mine because I was too arrogant to question the machine I inherited." What do you want from us? Patricia Vance, head of HR, asked quietly. She looked pale, guilty. She'd been part of the system. Resignations, Elena said, her voice steady and strong. Everyone who knew about the corruption and did nothing. Everyone who buried complaints, destroyed evidence, or participated in the cover-ups. You have 24 hours to resign voluntarily before we release everything to the press and recommend criminal charges. You're committing corporate suicide, Stark spat. We're committing honesty, Adrian replied. Something this company hasn't practiced in 2 decades. And yes, it will hurt. The stock will crash. We'll lose contracts. Our reputation will be destroyed. But we'll rebuild it on actual integrity instead of the illusion of it. And what about the thousands of employees who'll lose their jobs when this company collapses? They won't. Elena stepped forward, pulling up a new presentation. We've spent the past week developing a restructuring plan. The Daniel Ripley Foundation will become the operational heart of the new company. Every employee gets equity stakes. Whistleblower protections become ironclad policy. Executive compensation gets capped and tied directly to worker welfare metrics. You're describing socialism, not business, someone muttered. I'm describing what my grandfather actually built before people like you corrupted it, Adrian said. Thomas Bourne Sr. gave every employee stock options in 1952. He capped his own salary at 10 times his lowest workers' pay. He built daycare centers and paid for night school. That was Bourne Industries before it became about quarterly earnings and executive bonuses. James pulled up historical documents. The company's most profitable years were under Thomas Sr.'s leadership, using exactly the model Elena and Adrian are proposing. It wasn't socialism, it was smart business. Loyal, valued employees work harder, stay longer, and drive real innovation. The board members looked at each other, seeing the writing on the wall. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a revolution, and they could either join it or be swept away by it. Patricia Vance stood first. I'll resign. You're right. I knew about some of the terminations. I should have fought harder. She looked at Elena. I'm sorry. Truly. One by one, 8 of the 12 board members stood and left. Only James and 2 others remained. Younger members Adrian had appointed, ones who'd been pushing for reform. The rest will fight you, one of them said. Stark will go to the press first, spin this as a hostile takeover. Let him, Elena said. We're holding a press conference in 2 hours. We tell the story first, on our terms, with Margaret's testimony and all the evidence. By the time Stark tries to spin anything, the truth will already be everywhere. Adrian looked at her with something like awe. In 3 weeks, she'd gone from his housekeeper to his partner to the strongest person in this room. She'd taken her grief and transformed it into purpose, her anger into action. There's one more thing, he said to the remaining board members. We're locating every wrongfully terminated employee or their families. Full restitution, back pay, benefits, retirement contributions, plus damages. We're estimating it'll cost $300 million. The company doesn't have that kind of liquid capital. Then we'll sell assets. My penthouse goes first. The corporate jets, the executive retreat properties, the art collection. Adrian's jaw set. We liquidate everything unnecessary and we make this right. What about you? James asked quietly. This will leave you with almost nothing. Adrian looked at Elena, saw her small, proud smile, and felt richer than he'd ever been. I'll have everything that matters. The press conference was brutal and beautiful. Adrian stood before cameras and reporters, Elena's hand in his, and told the complete truth. His father's corruption, his own blind complicity, the systematic destruction of innocent people. Margaret's testimony played in full. Victim after victim appeared via video, telling their stories, including Sarah Connor, who'd been quietly organizing other survivors. My name is Adrian Bourne, he said, voice steady despite the flashing cameras. And my family built an empire on cruelty. I'm here today to tear that empire down and build something worthy of the people it destroyed. Elena spoke next, her father's photograph displayed behind her. Daniel Ripley believed in integrity until his last breath. Today, we're making sure his belief wasn't misplaced. That Bourne Industries can finally become what he thought it was. The questions came like bullets. The accusations. The disbelief. Through it all, Adrian and Elena stood together, answering honestly, accepting responsibility, refusing to hide behind lawyers or PR spin. When it ended, they walked out of the building hand in hand while protesters and supporters alike shouted from behind barriers. The stock had already dropped 40%. Adrian's phone showed hundreds of messages, investors threatening lawsuits, family members disowning him, former allies abandoning ship, and one text from an unknown number. "This is Sarah Connor. We're with you. All of us. You're not alone in this fight." "We did it," Elena whispered. "We destroyed everything." "No." She turned to face him on the street, people rushing past, the Bourne building looming above them like a tombstone. "We finally told the truth. Everything else was already destroyed. We just stopped pretending it wasn't." Adrian pulled her close, kissing her there on the sidewalk while cameras flashed and the world watched a billionaire choose love and justice over empire and lies. That night, the story dominated every news outlet. The emails went viral. Margaret's testimony sparked congressional investigations. Other companies scrambled to review their own practices, terrified they'd be next. And in a modest apartment in Queens, Elena and Adrian sat on her worn couch, eating takeout and watching their world burn on television, knowing that from the ashes, something better would grow. "I love you," Adrian said, not for the first time that day. "I know." Elena smiled, the grief in her eyes finally balanced by hope. "My father would have liked you, the you that you're becoming." "That's all I ever wanted to be," Adrian admitted. Someone Daniel Ripley would have been proud to know. They fell asleep there, exhausted and exhilarated, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of tragedy and built something neither could have created alone. Tomorrow would bring lawsuits, hearings, the hard work of rebuilding. But tonight, they had victory, not the kind measured in stock prices or profit margins, but the kind that meant finally being able to look in the mirror and see someone worthy of love. 6 months later, Elena stood in front of the newly renamed building. The brass letters had been removed from the entrance. No more Bourne Industries. In their place, simple steel lettering read, Ripley Bourne Foundation and Enterprises. Her father's name first. Always. Inside, the transformation was complete. The marble lobby that once echoed with the footsteps of anxious employees now buzzed with genuine energy. The intimidating reception desk had been replaced with an open welcome center staffed by Sarah Connor, who'd become their director of employee advocacy. "Morning, partner," Sarah called out with a warm smile. "Conference room 3, the Philadelphia families are here." Elena headed upstairs, passing walls now covered with photographs of every employee, not just executives, but custodial staff, warehouse workers, delivery drivers. Every person who made the company function, finally visible and valued. Adrian waited in the conference room, but he wasn't alone. 15 families sat around the table. People whose lives had been destroyed by wrongful terminations now gathered for their restitution meetings. These sessions happened weekly, and Adrian insisted on personally meeting each family, hearing their stories, apologizing face to face. Elena slipped in beside him, took his hand under the table. He squeezed back, grateful for her presence as he always was during these meetings. Some went smoothly. Others, like this one, wouldn't. "Mr. Bourne," said Robert Martinez, a man fired 5 years ago for fabricated safety violations. "You can write all the checks you want. Doesn't bring back the years my kids went without. Doesn't fix my marriage that fell apart from the stress." "You're right," Adrian said quietly. "It doesn't. Nothing I do can give you back what was stolen. But I'm asking you to accept this restitution not as payment for your suffering, but as acknowledgement that what happened to you was wrong, that you deserve better, that your family deserved better." Robert's wife, Linda, spoke up. "We saw the press conference. Saw you risk everything to tell the truth. That took guts." She paused. "Our daughter wants to be a lawyer now. Said she watched you and Ms. Ripley stand up there and decided she wanted to fight for people like us too. So maybe some good can come from all this pain." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. This was why they did it. Not just for restitution checks and policy changes, but for the shift in what people believed was possible, that the powerful could be held accountable, that truth could matter more than money. The meeting ended with handshakes and tears. Robert accepted the settlement. More importantly, he accepted the apology. After they left, Adrian slumped in his chair. 15 today, 23 more next week. I'll spend years doing this. We'll spend years doing this, Elena corrected. Together. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. How did I get so lucky? Lucky? You lost everything. The penthouse, the fortune, half your inheritance liquidated for restitution. And I gained everything that matters. He kissed her softly. You. Purpose. The ability to sleep at night. James knocked and entered, carrying champagne. Sorry to interrupt, but we just got the Q2 numbers. You need to see this. They gathered around his laptop. Despite the scandal, despite the restructuring, despite every prediction that they'd fail, Ripleyborn was profitable. Not wildly so, but steady, sustainable profit built on actual value rather than exploitation. Employee retention is at 98%, James reported. Productivity up 40%. Customer satisfaction scores are the highest they've been in a decade. Turns out people like doing business with companies that treat humans like humans. My grandfather was right all along, Adrian marveled. Daniel was right too, Elena added, touching the watch she still wore. He used to say that doing right and doing well weren't opposites. They were the same thing if you were patient enough to build it properly. That evening, they drove to the cemetery. They went every month, sometimes together, sometimes Elena alone when she needed to talk to her father without audience. Today they went together. Elena knelt by the headstone, placing fresh flowers. Adrian hung back, as he always did, giving her space until she gestured for him to join her. Hey, Dad, she said softly. We did it. Your name is on the building now. Everyone knows you were right, that you were innocent. The foundation has helped 200 families so far, and we're just getting started. She paused, then reached for Adrian's hand. And I met someone. I know it's complicated. He's the one who signed the paper that ruined our lives. But he's also the one who spent every day since making it right. He's become the kind of man you would have respected. The kind of man who reminds me of you, actually. Adrian's throat tightened. He knelt beside her. Mr. Ripley, I wish I could tell you in person how sorry I am. How much I've learned from your daughter about courage and integrity. She's the strongest person I've ever known, and I think she got that from you. They sat in comfortable silence, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. Finally, Elena spoke again. I'm going to marry him, Dad. I know you'd have questions, and you deserve answers. But I think you'd understand. He's not the man who hurt us anymore. He's someone new, someone better. And together, we're building the world you believed in. Adrian stared at her. Mary, did you just? Elena laughed, wiping tears. I'm proposing yes. Here, with my father as witness. Because you've spent 6 months proving every day that you're worthy of my love, my trust, my partnership. And I'm done waiting for some perfect moment. This is the moment. Right here, in front of the man who taught me what real integrity looks like. Adrian pulled a small box from his pocket, and Elena gasped. You, how long have you been carrying that? 3 weeks, waiting for the right time. He opened it, revealing a simple band with a single stone, nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed wealth, just beautiful and honest. Elena Ripley, will you marry me and keep saving me from myself every single day for the rest of our lives? Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, yes. He slid the ring on her finger, and they kissed there among the headstones. 2 people who'd found love in the ruins of tragedy and built something neither could have imagined. 3 years later, Elena stood in the Daniel Ripley Memorial Garden, a space they'd created at the company headquarters where employees could gather, reflect, and remember that every person mattered. Her hand rested on her swelling belly. 6 months pregnant with a daughter they'd already decided to name Danielle. Adrian appeared beside her, carrying coffee, decaf for her, regular for him. Board meeting went well. The employee council approved the expansion plan. 50 new positions, all with full benefits and equity stakes. My father would be proud, Elena said, not for the first time. He'd be proud of you, Adrian corrected. You built this, Elena. I just followed your lead. We built it together, she said firmly. That's how it works. Partnership. Their company had become a model. Other corporations studied their structure. Business schools taught case studies about the Ripley-born transformation. They'd proven that capitalism and compassion weren't opposites, that treating people with dignity was actually the most profitable path in the long run. But more than that, they'd proven that redemption was possible, that people could change, that love could grow even in the darkest soil. Elena looked at her father's photograph mounted in the garden, saw his proud smile, and knew with certainty that he'd forgive Adrian. Maybe had forgiven him already, wherever souls went after life ended. Because her father had always believed in second chances, in the power of people to become better than their worst moments. And Adrian had become exactly that, someone who'd taken his worst moment and transformed it into a lifetime of making things right. "I love you," Adrian said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands resting over hers on her belly. "I love you too," Elena replied. "And our daughter is going to grow up in a world where her grandfather's name means something, where his legacy is justice and compassion and the belief that every person matters. She's going to grow up with you as her mother," Adrian said, "which means she'll be unstoppable." They stood there as the sun set over the city, two people who'd survived grief and guilt to find something neither had been looking for, a love built not on perfection but on the hard, honest work of becoming better together. And in the garden that bore his name, Daniel Ripley's legacy lived on, not in tragedy, but in triumph. Not in what was lost, but in everything his daughter and the man who'd wronged her had built from the ashes. The end was really just a beginning. And it was beautiful. Wow, what a journey, right? From tears in that penthouse study to building something that honors Daniel Ripley's memory and transforms an entire industry. Drop a comment and tell me, what was your favorite moment in this story? And if you haven't already subscribed, do it now because I've got so many more stories that will grab your heart and never let go. Thank you for being here with me through every twist, every tear, every triumph. You're the best community, and I can't wait to share the next story with you.